And then I'll kind of like filter through that to decide like what order to ask things in. So that would be like the moderated portion of things.
Okay, perfect.
Anna, Ed was telling me earlier this week that he had recently chatted with like a similar group at Penn State because they have some what was the initiative that like the AI Alliance you mentioned, Ed? What was that like?
Yeah, let me get the exact name for you. And they actually receive public funds to actually do this kind of outreach work. Let's see. It's one's called LEAP for PIT, LEAP, which is learning. I forget what LEAP stands for. Oh, leadership, entrepreneurship, AI, and policy.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
And I don't know if PIT stands for Pennsylvania Institute of Technology. I'm not sure what PIT stands for. Let me see one more thing. Oh, Public Interest Technology University.
Oh,
Network.
yeah. I've seen that group, the PIT group. They do a lot of good initiatives. That's nice. I didn't know about this one.
Yeah. So they received a pretty good chunk of funding. And again, I don't know if it's federal or state, but part of it is the advocacy, kind of the work that you guys are doing in regards to the ethical use of AI. And most of their focus is on design and justice. But yeah. So if you're looking for a funding source, I can make a connection to this individual at Penn State if you want to learn more about it. Be happy.
Who was the person? Who was the individual?
Sandra Allain, Allain, and she is the professor of practice in the College of Engineering and International Affairs, but she's a director of law, policy, and engineering at Penn State. And director of the Masters in Engineering, Law and Policy, director of Design, Justice, and Sustainable Development Lab. But yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that. She's doing some pretty amazing work using actual virtual reality for law, which is pretty cool. But
oh wow, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I can definitely make a connection with you, Lily, if you want to forward it on. And yeah, no, she's awesome. Just generally, she's like amazing.
So, yeah, it'd be great to be connected with her. Thank you so much.
That sounds great.
I think it seems like there's a lot of overlap between our goals with MD4SG as an organization in like working with communities and thinking about sustainable development with this like AI and computational lens.
For sure. Well, and again, there's no point in reinventing a wheel, right? I mean, it's the more allies you have, the more collaborators, the better.
Yeah.
Did you meet Amulya Yadav at Penn State? He's in the computer science department. He's faculty there, but works on a lot of work with like social workers and homeless youth.
Yeah, spell his last name for me. I'm trying to visualize it. It sounds
related. Amulya Yadav is his name.
I believe I've been on a call with him once, but I haven't personally. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I've been working a lot with the College of Engineering, in particular their additive side, because working on the 3D printing concrete stuff and things of that regard. But in those circles, that's how I met Sandra. And then the NITNI AI Alliance is a research group that is kind of a spinoff from some PSU faculty. And so they are a nonprofit, but they're working with graduate students to do some research projects. Yeah. So they do research projects for the SEPTA, which is like the Area Transit Authority for South Philly and us. So yeah, I can share some of that later though.
Awesome. Anna, I just before other people start trickling in, do you want to are you gonna be doing any kind of like intro to the colloquia at the beginning, or should I just like get started at about?
Oh, I think you should just get started with introducing Ed, and then I'll be here for anything, and then we can just say like people can add questions on the chat, or can raise their hand and things like that. That's kind of it, right? Is there anything else? Yeah.
Do we have a date yet for Alyssa's? Do you want to like plug that at the end?
We can say that at the end. Yes, December 9th.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the website too. So we can, yeah. So yeah, I see a couple of people are trickling in. We're gonna wait for more, and we're gonna start in a few minutes, usually a few minutes after 11. Are we doing questions at the end or throughout the presentation? Do you have preferences on that?
So I was thinking because Ed's this thing would be shorter, like 20 minutes, we can just like have him give this introduction and then move on. Like the rest of the time will be more of a moderated thing. What do you think, Ed?
No, I'm 100% open with questions throughout. So yeah, so 100% fine with
Okay, yeah. So then,
yeah.
then we might take some.
Yeah, that sounds good. Where are you joining us from, Ed, by the way?
Pennsylvania. So
oh, you're in Pennsylvania right now. Okay, cool.
Yeah, Lancaster County. It's about an hour 15 west of Philadelphia. So yeah, right in central PA.
And remind me, is the Keystone area exclusively in Pennsylvania or is it multiple states?
Yeah. So my Goodwill is in 22 counties within Pennsylvania. So
Okay.
all in all, like my region is that particular area, and I'll kind of walk through that in the deck. You know how we kind of work or operate, but yeah. So just in central PA, there are some Goodwills that are across state lines. Actually, my previous Goodwill had Kansas and Missouri in my territory. So yeah, it's more. The maps were drawn like they were gerrymandered at some point. So it's you know we're 100 years old. Who knows what happened and what the political costs were to draw the maps.
There's some history everywhere.
Always. A lot can happen in 100 years.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Lori, Sherry, and Erin, thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me or having my professor invite me. I'm very interested.
Who invited you, Sherry?
I'm sorry?
Who did you say invited you?
I am a PhD candidate at UTSA, and my professor, Dr. Rao, got the invitation originally and invited me.
Okay. Well, very glad that you're here. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started maybe in a minute or two. All right, we'll get started in at 05. And Ed, our speaker, just asked in the chat if people could share where they're calling in from. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining us today. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, so there might be others who are tuning in from there. But for everyone around here, thanks so much for taking. Thank you so much, Ed, for taking the time to join our community today. We are very grateful to have Ed Lada from who is president and CEO of the Goodwill Keystone area, which is comprises several counties in Pennsylvania in the U.S. And Goodwill is nearly a 100-year-old nonprofit social enterprise that employs over 1,500 people and serves thousands of people per year. So Ed has been CEO of Goodwill in Western Missouri and Eastern Kansas, where he created the Artemis initiative, working on workforce development using a lot of innovative AI, including computer vision, that he'll present about today. So with I'll preface this by saying that this fireside chat today is trying to talk with Ed and really understand the challenges and priorities that practitioners like him and other folks at Goodwill are prioritized in working on like innovative applications of computation and other research initiatives, and how they are able to integrate that into their everyday practices to really instantiate this research and practice pipeline that we care so much about as a community. So with that, I'll give it to Ed to get started. And for everybody else here, please feel free at any point to add questions in the chat or raise your hand to ask a question directly. Thanks to you.
Appreciate it, Lily. Thank you very much. And MD4SG, I appreciate y'all having give me the opportunity to come and speak with you all today. Hopefully it'll add some value to the work that you're doing. My goal, hopefully by the end of this, is that I am an advocate for nonprofits and the work that you all are doing in this space, especially finding uses for good for a lot of this emerging technology. So with that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share my screen and preface this to be like, look, I broke the rule. There's a lot of words on these decks, mostly so I remember what the heck to say here, but I wanted to kind of give a snapshot of what Goodwill is, basically educate on what the Goodwill movement does for the communities that we serve, both on a national level, macro level, and then also on a local level, and to kind of talk about me and what brought me to this particular room kind of here today. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. All right, great. I'm assuming everybody can see this. All right, great. So a little bit about me. I'm born and raised New Orleanian and Hurricane Katrina refugee. That's probably a conversation over drinks. But first generation college graduate, a bachelor's degree from Loyola University of New Orleans, and my master's degree from Marist College in Public Administration. Before joining Goodwill, I spent 11 years in property management, worked for a minority-owned small business, focusing on kind of maintenance, remediation, light construction before joining Goodwill. And fun story is my wife forced me to go on the interview. A headhunter called me for the job at Goodwill, and I didn't want to go. And she was like, hey, babe, just go and interview. Who knows what could happen? And here we are, almost 6 years later in central Pennsylvania. So it's been quite a journey. But I served 5 years as vice president of contracts at the Goodwill of Southeastern Louisiana. And my whole jam there really was just to find employment for people with significant disabilities. And really fell in love with the Goodwill mission of empowerment, and basically taking my entrepreneurial spirit and that hustle that I learned for 11 years working for a small business and kind of weaponizing it for good kind of thing. But spent 5 years there, and then got an opportunity to become the president and CEO of the Goodwill in Kansas City, called Goodwill Western Missouri and Eastern Kansas. Served there for 3.5 years and did some fun, interesting things in computer vision, machine learning, and that I'll get into a little later. And then recently I was recruited to become the president and CEO of the Goodwill Keystone area, which is a $77 million annual revenue organization with 1,500 employees that has a territory of 22 counties here in central and southeastern PA. I am the 4th youngest Goodwill CEO. When I got the job in Kansas City, I was 38 years old, and 43 now. Why I wanted to become a Goodwill CEO was I was having a conversation with my old boss, who was CEO at the time in New Orleans, and this was probably 9 years ago. And I asked him why we weren't doing e-commerce in New Orleans, and he said, "Oh, e-commerce is a fad." And so it was that moment where I'm like, okay, this is kind of the thought leadership happening on the Goodwill movement. I was seeing things a little different. There was clearly a lack of imagination in some way, shapes, or form about where the future was going, and that really motivated me to go get my master's degree and eventually become a Goodwill CEO. This is going to sound super cool, but I attended Harvard Kennedy School exploring AI, technology, and policy. However, it was only for a week, so it's not that cool. But the week was pretty transformational. It's where I met Lily on that journey. And if you're not aware of Lily's work, utterly inspiring and amazing. She's a rock star, so absolutely check out the work that she's done. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. Oh, married, 2 kids, like walking on the beach, yada, 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 right? So enough there. So a little bit about the Goodwill movement. So Goodwill is a federated model, and our whole jam really is to help people with barriers to employment. So these are people with diverse abilities, or what you probably have known as disabilities, justice involved individuals, single mothers, anybody with a barrier to employment that needs assistance in order to get gainfully employed, but then also keep and remain employed. And so, but most of you probably have heard of Goodwill based on our thrift stores, which is absolutely a key component of our model. But by and large, we're a $7 billion entity. There are 155 Goodwills in the United States alone. We are 501c3 nonprofits. Some organizations also have for-profit arms that do real estate and other kind of business. But by and large, we are the largest workforce development provider in the country as a federated model. And a federated model essentially is kind of like a franchise model, but not, right? So we have our own local board of directors. I have 8 bosses, and there are 155 Goodwill CEOs, kind of thing, and we all kind of fall under the Goodwill Industries International umbrella, which basically handles like brand standards and advocacy and education and things of that sort. But every Goodwill in your community is a locally operated by local volunteer board, and a part of that beauty of that kind of autonomy is our ability to be agile in the marketplaces that we serve. But we are the OG, the original social enterprise. We're essentially have taken things that people no longer need and created economy out of it in order to help push the social good. And so we do that through, and our main vehicle, as you know, is our thrift stores. And so when you donate at a store, we turn that and curate that product in order for people that need it or want it, and do a whole slew of other workforce development mission services based on the net proceeds from a lot of those activities. But we are a very large nonprofit as an entity, being $7 billion currently in revenue of a now probably about $25 billion market. In thrift stores, that's expected to be about $30 billion within the next 5 years. So rapidly growing industry. Annually, we serve over 2 million people in workforce development as a movement in mission services, and have placed just last year 123,000 people in jobs, equating to over $2.7 billion in wages. We receive over 107 million donations in a year, the Goodwills globally, or nationally rather. And we do over 690 million in federal and state set-aside programs. A lot of people don't know Goodwill does this, but there are a lot of Goodwills that partner with Ability or using Ability One contracts and state use contracts to employ people with significant disabilities, where 75% of those hours must be worked with somebody with a significant disability. And a lot of people don't realize we do a lot of that work, but we do a lot of that work, nearly $1 billion just in that line of business, or 3/4 of $1 billion rather. All in all, we have 4,200 stores and donation centers all across America to kind of talk about our size and scope. And we are about 10 million from 80% of all Americans. So we have a very large transportation, logistics, supply chain efforts. You know, people think that we're thrift stores, but the reality of it is we're more like light manufacturing. We create widgets. We're probably more akin to food service than we are traditional retail because we have a product that we have to cure, and there's a life cycle to that product. And what we do extremely well, it's probably been our market differentiator, is taking extreme volume and learning how to move and curate those items from a sustainability standpoint. And again, anecdotally, it's estimated about 45% of all salvage in North America comes from Goodwills. So it is a massive, massive operation, especially from a sustainability standpoint, that a lot of people don't realize the environmental impacts that Goodwills have within their communities. So who is Goodwill Keystone Area? So I'm president and CEO of Goodwill Keystone Area, which is Goodwill in Central and Southeastern PA, 22 counties. We have 1,500 employees ourselves, 47 retail logistics centers, along with government contracts and a lot of other businesses, along with our workforce development and mission services. Our mission, our particular mission at our Goodwill, is to advance sustainability in communities so individuals can thrive and flourish. We do that by really focusing on 4 pillars of sustainability, and you may know what this is, but the 4 pillars of sustainability being environmental, human sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. So really looking at a holistic view of how do we allow our communities to prosper and flourish. And so to do that, everything from our retail stores to our contract services to our mission services, this whole breadth of what Goodwill has become really is to be of service to create sustainable communities in all these facets. Our organization diverts nearly 45 million pounds from landfills annually. We were a recipient of $10 million gift from the McKinsey Scott Fund. For those of you that don't know McKinsey Scott, ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, and she's been probably the greatest philanthropist of our time. And we were fortunate enough to get one of her gifts, which was a legacy gift and transformational gift that hopefully we'll be able to pivot and kind of talk about some of the things that we're going to dive into here in the future. But the scope of our operations, and most Goodwill operations, is our donated goods retail stores, our e-commerce lines of business services, which includes like custodial work for government, our mission services, which is a plethora of workforce development, re-entry programs, skills training, mental health. We have a clubhouse, which is an amazing model where we allow, where we have, actually not allow, but we encourage people with mental disabilities to come and congregate and create community and basically try to fulfill whatever needs they have in order for them to become gainfully employed. We have 3 warehouses, approximately 350,000 square feet of warehouse space, and a full suite of supply chain logistics and transportation. We move product and a lot of it, and we do it really well. But that has its own pressures that we'll kind of get into a little later. We average over 1 million donors and nearly 3 million shoppers a year in our stores. And we have approximately 66,000 people a year that shop via our e-commerce platform, shopgoodwill.com. If you haven't seen that or checked that out, we have some pretty amazing treasures there. Go scope it out. And to kind of give you an idea of the scope of our environmental impact, this is kind of one little data point, but through the reuse sale of just our jeans and t-shirts alone in our stores, we've saved the environment about 453 million gallons a year just the past year. And that's just from, you know, over creation of these garments, being able to keep that as part of the closed loop cycle and that recyclability and that reuse. And that is just one small snippet of our environmental impact just within our organization. Nevertheless, Goodwill's all across the country. And if anybody has any questions, just post it in the chat. Lily, just let me know if somebody poses a question, interrupt me, it's all good. So what are some of our opportunities and problems? We have high turnover at the line level positions, along with a lot of other groups that work in retail and other nonprofits, mostly driven by compensation concerns. You know, it is very physical work, very manual jobs, unfavorable retail hours, light manufacturing, light production expectations, because we have to be able to move that product and move that product quickly. We like to say that there's a phrase, door to the floor in 24. So essentially, when you donate something to a Goodwill store, our goal is to try to get that from that donation door to the floor within 24 hours. So it really is this kind of cyclical nature of moving product around in order to be able to sell in various ways. Other opportunities is the market is shifting more to e-com, but there is also a huge influx of third-party resellers that essentially has shown that we are leaving a lot of revenue on the table that could be put more toward our mission. And so that problem there in itself was really what drew me to AI. And I'll kind of talk about a project that I worked on here in a little bit. We have very old processes. You walk into one of our back rooms, and the way that we're doing business now is very similar to the way we did business 40 years ago. Again, the purpose of the stores were supposed to be transitional employment opportunities, right? They're not necessarily meant to be careers. Like, we love good turnover. So the goal is, hey, if you've had a bad string of luck in your life or made some poor decisions in the past, how do we rebuild you and get you in a position to where you can hopefully put yourself and your family in a position to live your best life? And so the jobs were meant to be transitional, and the turnover was designed to be high in order to create more opportunity for individuals, which is not typically a model that works in a capitalistic system. But for 100 years, we figured that out, right? But because of that, because of the natural design of a 100-year-old kind of nonprofit, a lot of our operations are ripe for disruption. And just like any other nonprofit that you will talk to, part of our charge as a nonprofit is that we must be good stewards with the funds. So when decisions need to be made between, hey, do I do this research and development, or do I invest in this technology? It usually is, okay, I'm going to do this chunk to do that, or I'm not going to serve these 10, 20, 100 people and possibly change their life. And that really is the math for most nonprofits. So typically nonprofits in this space, in this kind of advanced technology, or just general technology, quite simply, are probably 5 to 10 years behind what the marketplace is. And that's mostly because the value proposition is constantly need to be weighed. And so, so our processes are old, right? We are ripe for disruption in just about every aspect of what we do in the business. And that is not only frightening, but exciting at the same time, because we have a tremendous amount of potential. Underserved populations that we serve are being left behind because of evolution of technology. Essentially, this divide, and I'm sure you've seen it in political discourse, but the profit margins are going up, the wages are going down, and the more the companies are investing in automation in its various forms, we're going to become a heck of a lot more efficient, a lot more effective. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the populace is going to always benefit from that. And typically the first people left behind with these technologies are unskilled or underskilled labor. And so what's happening is that we're starting to create economies that are the haves and the have-nevers, because there's a large segment of the population, whether you're someone with a significant disability or undereducated or unskilled, that is being left behind. And there's proof in that. In the market crash of 2008, the 99% of the jobs that came back were for people that had a high school diploma or more. That means that people that did not have a high school diploma or were undereducated, those jobs did not come back for those individuals. And so as technology really starts ramping up, we're going to see more and more of that, and that's a considerable problem, or actually honestly an opportunity from a social standpoint that Goodwills can help with. And then external pressures that are making business difficult. We are a social enterprise, so we have the luxury of being able to create our own economy through our stores, which a lot of nonprofits don't have that ability. They have to go raise funds and ask for funds. But because we run a business like a in order to generate that profit to put back into mission services, we have to compete with for-profit entities, right? So e-commerce competition is gaining market share. Some of you probably had bought on ThreadUp or RealReal or Facebook Marketplace. So the pipeline to capture some of these goods, the donations and the procurement of the goods, have definitely diversified faster than we've been able to keep up. And mostly because we're a 100-year-old nonprofit and move like a 100-year-old nonprofit. We're not necessarily built for that type of agility. The cost of doing business is in hyperdrive. Obviously, everybody's felt inflation, rising wages, whether that's minimum wage increases or just market wage increases, which, philosophically, we're 100% on board with, but every dollar our wage goes up, just at our line level employees, it costs us about $2.5 million a year, bottom line, that we have to find a way to make up. And the only way we can do that is to become more efficient and more effective to be able to do that. But cost of materials, cost of gas, which everybody I'm sure on this call has been dealing with, rising real estate costs, et cetera. So the cost of doing business is making it more difficult for us to keep up. Disinformation is hurting the brand of Goodwill in media platforms. I'd be curious, and feel free to mark it in chat. How many of you thought we were a for-profit organization, or that I'm the one Goodwill that owns Goodwill and I make like $2.2 million a year? Like, that stuff is not true at all. And there's a lot of disinformation on social media that gets parroted and repeated that really takes shine away from the work that Goodwill's doing, but also other nonprofits. I mean, there are some amazing nonprofits out there that are suffering from that as well. And again, a lack of education. A lot of people don't really understand what Goodwill does outside of thrift stores. It's been a problem for us for like the last 80 years. We don't know if people really care. They just know we do good work, and maybe that's enough. But because of that, things like the 14C sub-minimum wage certificate that the federal government allowed work centers that a lot of Goodwills navigated, which was a mechanism for us to employ people with very significant disabilities that typically wouldn't be in the marketplace from employment side, that has gone away. And a lot of that was due to social media pressure around the fact that people were making less than minimum wage. But the reality of it was that particular program wasn't necessarily designed to help not only the individual, but also the families of these individuals who were caretakers that were able to reclaim their lives in some way, shape, or form, because their family members now had purpose and had structure where typically they probably wouldn't. So that was one of the biggest harms, I think, of a lot of disinformation campaigns, or the lack of understanding. And we own that part too, right? And I kind of talk about it here. Sometimes we do suck. I mean, we do. We're 100 years old. We've put our foot in our mouth more times than I can count. We've been scrutinized for high executive compensation. There were some Goodwills, including ours, that paid well below minimum wage in a way that we probably shouldn't, but we were just following the federal guidelines. But that type of stuff created this exposure that definitely has hurt the brand over the last decades or two. With that. And then, one thing that I'm very passionate about that the Goodwill movement is working toward is getting a little bit more oversight on our salvage operations. When you donate something and we can't sell it in our stores, and we can't sell it in our outlet where you can buy it by the pound, and if we can't recycle it, it either goes in the trash or it goes into our salvage stream, which essentially goes to developing countries. And those products that we're not able to sell in America wind up getting sold in developing countries with small entrepreneurs, basically. But unfortunately, once it leaves our warehouses and gets to the salvage brokers, we don't really have clear line of sight of where that goes. And so there's a lot of brand risk, and there's a lot of unknowns in that process that I think also, besides trying to clean up what that is, I think it's also a tremendous opportunity for us moving forward. All right, so what the hell does any of this have to do with AI? Right? I get it. I get this question all the time. So when I was
we have Shubham has a question. If you want to go ahead, Shubham.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. I had a quick question. I think seemed relevant on the last slide. As you're talking about like moving product a lot, I was just curious as to what were the impacts of such a big operation during COVID? Or what were the challenges that you faced then?
Yeah. So great question. When I was in Kansas City when COVID hit, and when the government shutdowns happened, I wound up having to lay off literally half of our staff. So we were burning through cash to where we went from probably 45 days on cash to 4 days on cash by the end of the shutdowns. And so we had to make some pretty radical adjustments during that time. And luckily, we were able to bounce back very, very strongly. We were able to bring back most of our employees within a couple of months of that shutdown. And so a lot of Goodwills all across the country battled with that. We lost $1 billion as a collective movement from the shutdowns. However, what really kept us afloat were our government contracts where we were doing those services, but then also our e-commerce operations where we'll still be able to sell product, just not through our traditional brick and mortar stores. So no, I'd say that about 40% of Goodwills are probably in danger mode from a bankruptcy standpoint during that time, because again, we're a nonprofit, so there are very few of us that have cash reserves to be able to withstand a pandemic, right? And a lot of us benefited from the PPP loans and other avenues like that really helped us kind of keep afloat and jumpstart what that was. But from an operational standpoint, it was unprecedented. And again, that's cliche at this point, right? But we went through just basically what every other retailer did. Quite frankly, and most of our 80% of our revenue comes from donated goods retail. So when that whole thing shut down, we lost this is the reason why I'm so gray, man. Was there another question, Lily?
Aaron, please go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm kind of curious about whether Goodwill has some kind of interaction or any kind of decision-making process involved with other unions or any kind of other community leaders for that kind of labor empowerment stuff. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, 100%. Some Goodwills have union employees. It really depends on the marketplace. It really depends on where you are on that front, but we are hyperactive in our community. So because of the Goodwill brand is typically known as the most recognized nonprofit brand, along with St. Jude's Hospital. I think we're usually Teeter 1 and 2. We use that as a convener, right? The brand of Goodwill as a convener with a lot of local government officials, a lot of city government officials, along with other nonprofits and for-profit partners. So our whole jam is to try to create this ecosystem that allows us to train majoritarily underrepresented communities and create a pipeline for work for them, but then also partnering with those federal and state entities and those for-profit entities for them to find their workforce in untraditional ways. A lot of people don't realize that, there's I want to say 17% of all people with disabilities in America are actually working. So there's a huge segment of the population that is not gainfully employed or not even looking for employment because our society has kind of left them behind and didn't see them as valuable. And so part of our narrative and part of our work is to change that, right? Part of my work as a vice president of contracts when I was trying to hire people with significant disabilities is that I would have put any of my work crews against any able-bodied group, and you will find a more loyal workforce. You will find a more committed workforce, one that will instantly change your culture. And again, a lot of that is just a lack of awareness, right? There's a lot of people that never worked with people with significant disabilities. And quite frankly, some of the first questions I get when I walk in the door, can they do the work? Well, that's a pretty offensive question, right? But that's kind of the status, that's kind of the aura around these populations is they're viewed as high risk. When the reality is probably farthest from the truth. Some of my most loyal employees, most productive employees were people that were entering from the prison system, after serving years in prison and just wanting to not go back, right? You'll find very few motivators more strong than not wanting to return to prison. And so really turning over rocks and helping these individuals become productive members of society and to create their own economy to where they're not having to rely so much on government resources. So we like to say a hand up, not a handout. As part of our motto, but that really is because a lot of these government systems that are set in place, they're to keep people off the street. They're not necessarily there to help people thrive and to build wealth, right? And if you want to break the cycles of generational poverty and criminality, you have to be able to allow individuals the pathway to claim some generational wealth, and that's really what my North Star is. and what I hope all Goodwills kind of strive to create.
Awesome. We have one more question from Sarah Lenardi from the University of
Sure.
Pittsburgh in the chat. So you mentioned at some point, Ed, that Goodwill is less like a retail organization, more like food service. Sarah asked if you could elaborate a little bit more on
No,
what that
sure.
means.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the retail arm is basically our front-facing aspect to the communities that we serve. But the reality of it is 90% of that work happens behind the door. So we are more akin to light manufacturing. So when you donate something, we have to go through and sort it, what's sellable, what's not. Then we have to determine quality and value of what that donation is. And at that point, we have to determine whether or not it's fit for sale within the stores or a different mechanism. And at that point, we're pricing it, we are organizing it, we are putting it on hangers. You know, there's a huge process that goes through, and then we roll it out into the floor. So, but because of that, because of the amount of donations that we get, we have warehousing that we do to store a lot of these goods. There's seasonality involved. We have a huge trucking fleet in order to move a lot of this product. And so for us, every time we touch something that is donated, it costs us money. So we have to be hyper efficient with the way we move product around to get it either through the store or the outlet, or find a way to recycle and repurpose it in order for us to not lose money on it. So what we can't recycle, what we can't redonate, which for us right now at my Goodwill is probably about 76% of what is donated finds a new home or finds a way to repurpose. But that leaves another 20 some odd percent that we have to find a way to trash because it's not sellable, because no one wants it, and we can't recycle it for whatever reason. And that trash cost is substantial. So it's not only from a business standpoint smart for us to find as many pathways to reuse and upcycle this stuff. There's a tremendous amount of work that happens behind the scenes that is more akin to the life cycle of food on a production line, right? So really viewing us more on the production side of what light manufacturing looks like. We create widgets, right? We're curating product. That's what we're doing. We take that one thing you donate and make a lot of determinations that's almost 100% subjective at this point, and before it even gets to the floor. So if you ever get a chance to visit a Goodwill, peek in the back room and you'll see how the mechanism works. And if you're ever in PA, I'd be more than happy to show anybody how that works. But that's really what I mean, is that we are much more light manufacturing with a retail arm behind the scenes, because that's probably 90% of where our work actually lies.
Thank you.
Right.
That's great.
Yep. All right. Aaron, you had your
perhaps
sorry for the interruption, Lily. Yeah, I was kind of having a follow-up question, like how do the people actually get that kind of opportunity? Like how do they need to sign into any kind of list, and then the matching happening with the other kind of opportunity, and then they are assigned to any kind of job? So how does that kind of process works within the Goodwill?
So it really depends on where you are and what your Goodwill does, but most Goodwills will have case management and workforce development professionals that will help individuals either learn a skill, like for instance, we help them write resumes. They may want to get a certificate of some sort. They may want to get digital skills training. So it really depends on what the need is of that particular client. Some of it is case management, where they have to understand where their benefits come from and how not to lose their benefits, and how to get access to different benefits, and benefits, or say housing or healthcare or transportation. And so our approach is that when anybody can come to a Goodwill and say, hey, I need help finding a job, or I need help in some way, shape, or form. And most Goodwills will help them fill their need. Or if we can't do it, we'll connect them with someone else in the community that does that type of work. So kind of, I mentioned that convening aspect of that. So no, it really is a case-by-case basis. It really depends on what you need. But if you were looking for assistance on any of those things I just mentioned, and plus, visit your Goodwill or contact your Goodwill's Workforce Development or Mission Services Department. Tell them what your issues are, what your problems are, and they'll be able to help navigate what that is. But and again, most of the stuff that we do is around trying to get individuals gainfully employed. So if they need to be reskilled, upskilled, if they just need help finding a job, we do that. And then also, of course, our stores are a mechanism for that. So our stores are our best social program, because most people that come work for us from a part-time standpoint make anywhere between $22,000 a year to over $100,000 a year if you run a really big store with bonus and things of that sort. Every store we open creates 20 to 60 new jobs in those communities, whether full-time, part-time. And then our organization has a large benefits package as well. So, but all in all, we try to look at the holistic issue and on individual by individual cases.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So, what does this have to do with AI? And I love the questions and I appreciate it. And I'm happy to answer all of these now or even after the meeting, because I want you to know what we do and understand the importance of what we do and hopefully help. So when I was president and CEO of the Goodwill in Kansas City, I realized that a lot of our process in the back was very subjective. And what I mean by that is a human has to determine quality, determine size, type, value of the things that we get. And then they have to make a determination of what we sell that for. And so the way that our pricing structure typically works in a Goodwill is unit-based pricing, where a $150 pair of jeans may be $10 and a $10 pair of jeans may be $10, right? So there's not it's part of the treasure hunt experience, but it also shows how much value that we're leaving on the table. And that's kind of represented by the fact that 33% of our shoppers are now third-party resellers. So there's a lot of value, or there's a lot of intent of the donation that we aren't maximizing. That really had me thinking about, okay, how do we solve that problem? And so my capstone for my master's degree was a 50-page white paper on what a smart Goodwill store would look like, but more importantly, what a virtual reality or augmented reality Goodwill store would look like. And there was a company called Yihaoden in China that in 2013 opened up 150 virtual or augmented reality grocery stores. And I just got fascinated with this concept of, okay, well, what would that look like for Goodwill? I can't even picture it. And then work the problem backwards and, realize, okay, well, we need a virtual inventory in order to do this stuff. Well, in order to do that, we're going to need to find a way to automate the camera system, the images and the listing. And then in order to do that, we're going to probably need to automate our back rooms or our warehouses and just really work the problem backwards, and wrote this 50-page kind of capstone talking about, hey, this is the future of Goodwill, but more importantly, how do we embrace automation but not lose the people aspect of what we do, right? How do we create workforce development for the future state of work in lockstep to where we can augment the human and not replace the human? And so in that study, in that work, I came across computer vision machine learning. I had no idea what it was. I was like, hold on, this is interesting. And about 1.5 years of research into that, we decided to do a proof of concept that essentially would use computer vision machine learning to determine size, type, quality, and fabric composition, with the intent of the proof of concept was, can this do it, right? Will this actually work? And of course, we did our launch, letting everybody know that we're going down this path, and then COVID hit. But we still did the research. It just took a lot longer than what we did. But the point of the project was, can computer vision machine learning categorize and eliminate the subjectivity in our process, so we then can train people alongside the data annotation for the neural network to be an image capture specialist and things of this sort, to where we create new types of jobs, more value-added jobs than our high 300% turnover production associate jobs, right? So that was kind of the bigger vision, but we felt like this was not natural first step if we're ever going to get to that future state of what does VR, AR look like for a Goodwill store, right? And eliminate the overhead of brick and mortar and things, and more accessibility to different populations. And on top of that, the most important thing was what wound up being created because we did this work was the Artemis Initiative, which was workforce development for advanced technologies around robotics, around eventually 3D printing, VR, AR, advanced manufacturing, arms, and it was pretty incredible. I mean, what I learned in that process was that the act of doing the research, the act of doing the proof and concept, created all of these intangible cultural building things that I had no idea was going to happen. Retention went up. Recruitment was a heck of a lot easier. We started getting national recognition for what we're doing. We got invited to the White House to talk about the Workforce Development Initiative. We raised over $1 million to do a lot of this work in about a year and a half through that. And we essentially built culture around this idea of research and development and AI. And in the proven concept, it was a mixed bag. We proved that computer vision machine learning could actually do this work. But when we started the design, by the end of the proven concept was over, which was about a year and a half later, the cameras were out of date. Synthetic data wasn't really a big thing when we started. And part of our process was taking individual images of our donations and then doing the data annotation. So it was very, very time consuming, was not very efficient. But we generated about 25,000 images and we're able to do some modeling. And what we realized was that, with enough data, computer vision machine learning can be a serious game changer for us. And all in all, we spent about $500,000 in a 2-year period on the tech side with a partnership with a third-party partner, North Exponential, and then about another $300,000 in additional labor in order to do the proof of concept. And again, all for what, right? All for what? And I'm going to show a quick video here, but I'll introduce you to my buddy, Tim. Hopefully I can, there we go. Okay. This is my buddy, Tim. Tim has Down syndrome, 24-year-old gentleman now. But part of the work that we were doing was trying to showcase the technology in a way that you can touch it, taste it, feel it, and to show how intuitive the technology was becoming. So the narrative was that, hey, Tim here is not only doing the image capture process, but he was also part of the data annotation team. Well, I can say that Tim is probably in less of 0.5% of people that have done work alongside AI or in doing the data annotation for the neural network. And that is a real future-proof kind of job. But here's Tim, who would have never been thought of as a solution to do some of this data entry work, is learning how to do this stuff from a kind of a line level. And so, but this was the camera system that we developed. You can see at the top left corner, there are 4 cameras there. If you look at the Goodwill cup with the scissors in it, there are these big buttons that you press to take an image of the front side, back side, the spectrometer, and so on and so forth. And so part of it, and this thing actually moved up and down depending on your height. So it was designed with the intent that anybody who would have access to it, in theory, would be able to use it, right? And so in order to really showcase this narrative that, hey, this technology should be for everyone. But we need to make sure that we're having these conversations to be inclusive when we start doing this work. And so I want to show you a quick video of the launch of the event and why it matters, right? Why the work you're looking to do in this space matters. And give me a quick second, I'll pull that video up. Did the video YouTube pop up?
Yep, we can see it, Ed.
Great, here we go.
We should be instilling in this generation, in the next, in all of us, that we have a responsibility to take care of those that cannot take care of themselves.
My hope is that we're able to pilot something that can scale to organizations all over the country in order to serve their communities. The need is so great now, and it's going to continue to rise even in the future, that we have to be very deliberate about leveraging these technologies and make sure that they're there to augment the human experience, not replace the humans.
The program's called Mosaic, and what it does is it allows us to index a huge amount of information and put it into a virtual reality space. So in the case of Goodwill, it would allow us to train individuals faster on sorting, pricing, gauging the quality of garments, deciding what's ready for sale, what's not. We can reduce training time. We can virtualize training so it can be done anywhere in the country.
The exciting thing is to introduce this to people who never had exposure to technology before and to gain their interest and their excitement and develop those skills.
You know, for nearly a century, Kansas City has been a leader in global design and innovation.
Anthony showed us how to program the robot, and then when you were finished, you could move the tennis ball over from one side to the other.
There is not another organization better positioned to make sure that people do not get left behind than a 126-year-old organization that's main mission is workforce readiness, workforce preparedness. What I like to say, the thing is that excites me about this is it's not a workforce initiative, it's a workforce imperative.
I think it's inspiring because it's really, really fun to use and kind of expand the world.
The potential is there for everyone. This is a level playing field if it's done right and if it's done intentionally, and if the opportunity and the awareness is there, the sky's the limit.
The difference between history and legacy is clear. History is something you look back upon. Legacy is something you live up to. The communities need your help. So you got to decide, is this going to be your history or your legacy?
So I'm very proud of the fact that that program is still ongoing, and you're probably asking, okay, why did I leave? I feel like my
well, good morning.
You're about to hear from Tom Ford. Let me turn it off. Yeah, and at my Goodwill in Kansas City, we were very strapped for resources, and COVID hit us hard. And so when I took over that organization, we were really literally on the verge of bankruptcy. And when I left, it was a complete turnaround. But the organization that I joined now it had much larger, but a lot more resources, right? I mentioned McKinsey Scott funds. And I was very, I had to make a personal decision about, okay, well, how much further do I really want to push this narrative, right? Can I do it where I was at the time? Or do I need to find a way to get access to more resources to really change the game, right? I mean, I don't know how many of you actually get a chance to think about what it is that you want to do. But for me, I want to change the way Goodwills do business before I retire. And part of that is, a mentor of mine once said that Goodwills have done an amazing job of creating the working poor. And this is a gentleman that actually created one of the first colleges within the Goodwill movement. And yes, we have colleges. And I just took it as a charge of action, right? Is that, yeah, the working poor is absolutely necessary. Like we're a second chance, third chance, fourth chance employer. But we've never really been able to move the needle significantly around this concept of creating generational wealth. And so what I viewed these advanced technologies like AI, computer vision, machine learning, robotics, was that it's really could be the great equalizer, right? In that the way that the gig economy is formulating, the access to information, this growing sense of collegiality amongst these tech groups, I saw as, hey, it no longer mattered what your station was or where your family came from. It's just access opportunity, access information that can really leapfrog individuals into hopefully, at the line, at least at the base level, start their journey into generational wealth building through some of these technologies. And so, I made the decision after being recruited to this organization to be like, okay, yeah, if I'm really going to do this and do it right, this probably is an organization to help me get there. And so I've been here a year, and since then, my foundation has allowed me to seed $600,000 to develop the first of its kind research and development arm within Goodwill. Now, it'll be for our organization, but the intent is to help Goodwills all across the country with hopefully what we develop. And again, we're a $7 billion entity that has not done R&D in any significant way. Like, we have pockets of innovation within our individual organizations, but there hasn't been a real concerted effort into, okay, what does that look like, right? How do we automate? How do we do these things? And forgive the dog in the background. Hey, we're used to it by now, but if you hear barking, that's what it is. So we are launching this in Q1 of next year to start creating basically what that foundation looks like, right? So that what are the guardrails? What are the go, no go matrices? Where do we want to focus? How are we going to tie workforce development into whatever we develop? And then how do we create products that we can scale to other organizations and other Goodwills, considering that we're fortunate enough to have 4,200 locations that can really adopt what we create, right? And so some of the projects that we're currently exploring are things like 3D printed concrete buildings. We get a lot of glass as part of our recycling. Can we repurpose that glass to help create the powdered concrete to do 3D printed concrete buildings? We're talking with a group out of Penn State to maybe do our first attendant donation center that's a 3D printed building. We're talking about, and this is a bigger project, but can we recycle some of our plastics in our stream to create filament so we can 3D print our own plastic needs? When we think of hangers and size rings and gaylords, which are big cardboard boxes, and bins and stuff like that, can we repurpose some of that stuff? And then using computer vision machine learning to identify collectible cards. We get a lot of baseball cards, Magic, Pokemon. We can use computer vision machine learning and robotics to help sort that in a way that we're currently not doing, because a lot of stuff just sits in the corner until we can get to it. Well, how can we mine the value of what we're getting more, right? Other things, we're partnering with Penn State Nittany Alliance, AI Alliance rather, and a group of graduate students are using computer vision machine learning to identify shoes that would automatically get kicked to econ, because we happen to get more revenue through that model for some particular things, and shoes is one of those. And then we are launching what's called the Mobile Learning Lab, which is basically a big trailer that we're taking to communities to showcase not only technology, but to do everything from financial literacy, workforce development, things of that sort. But part of that is we're going to showcase some virtual and augmented reality workforce development solutions. And essentially, and again, I say this loosely, not metaverse, but just the metaverse kind of thing, right? The Goodwill in that space, and using it as a way to create accessibility for everybody. And without having people to come to our office, us taking the technology out to them so they can learn a skill, so they can learn how to do mock interviews in virtual reality, and using wearable technology. If you have a disability, a cognitive disability, and you can use, like Google Glass, for instance, which I know isn't a thing anymore, but essentially use that to say, hey, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Right, and then what are the workforce development apprenticeship programs alongside some of these fields, so we can develop the workforce development alongside the implementation of technology, and then looking at downstream salvage disruption, and really using AI in order to track where our downstream process is and get a better understanding of what all that we're collecting within not only our existing data sources, but kind of new data sources. So with that, I'll kind of stop the share. I know there's a lot of information, but I wanted to kind of, Lily wanted me to share what the breadth of Goodwill was, because a lot of people aren't aware of what we do or how complicated our business is. But where I find AI and computer vision machine learning and all the mechanisms underneath machine learning, I think can have tremendous value, because if it can make us more efficient and effective, and oh, by the way, we can create the workforce development of the future, everybody wins in that space. So with that, I'll pause. So I didn't see any other questions in the chat, but before, I guess, Lily, I don't know if you want to ask any questions, or if anybody has any questions about what we just covered.
Thank you so much, Andrew. To get us started with this next phase of discussion for the 16 minutes that we have you. Thank you so much for just all of the work that you and the whole team at Goodwill does in labor empowerment, sustainability, in creating this kind of circular economy. And the Artemis project, I think, is an awesome example of the kind of innovation that can be done in this space. But what do you see as the role of research and of academia, and how can researchers create these partnerships with organizations like Goodwill? How would that get started?
Yeah, great question. And I've done a lot of partnerships with different universities. So I'll share some examples and then kind of dive into why it's so important. So partner with the University of Missouri, Kansas City in order to do a third-party overview or a proof of concept to basically build up a business case for the technology and other pathways that we can kind of focus. And we work with the professors directly on that research and paid them to do that research. So that was one aspect. And then I mentioned some of the Penn State collaborations that we're currently doing. One really cool thing that we did was we took part in a capstone, one of their capstones, which essentially was 700 engineering freshmen, basically showed them our backroom process and said, hey, show us how you would automate this, but try to make it as accessible and intuitive as you possibly can. And they had 700 students work on that project. We did and judged, I want to say all in all, 20 different projects, and some really opened our eyes to new ways of looking at things. I'll share one example, which is really cool, was dynamic pricing, but you basically creating a gamification of, hey, what would you pay for this particular item, and crowdsource what pricing should be. So something we had never considered, right? You know what your retail price of an item is, but the real value is, well, what will someone pay for that item, right? And so using a gamified way to say, hey, guess what this price is and what would you pay kind of thing, to do that. We had a gentleman, or actually a team, that 3D printed a hanger that was foldable. So by the way, if anybody wants $1 billion idea, find a way to automate the hanging of a garment and you will be rich. But it was just a beautiful design, right? They 3D printed a hanger that did this and folded open with a click of a button. And it was just like, and that was only like 2 months worth of research that these students were doing. So those are just some ways, along with some of the more structured partnerships that I've partnered with universities. Where I see universities as being not only strategic partner, but necessary partner, is that you all are on the cutting edge, if not bleeding edge, of a lot of this work. There is not, when people say, hey, you work in AI, how many people look at you like a deer in headlights, right? Because it's not tangible, right? Hell, you're working on neural networks and you don't even know really how it works, right? So, so part of it is that the fact that universities are, you know, the base level of knowledge within most of the country. And so if nonprofits are going to be able to compete not only in the public space, you know, with for-profit entities, but deliver more mission services, we're going to have to find different ways to add that expertise to the work that we do on very limited resources, right? So part of it, where I find university as an amazing niche, is that's where you can fill that void for nonprofits. Is that because you have the time, you have the research capabilities, you have the network, right? The connectivity of, hey, you really need to talk to so-and-so about this. That is invaluable, because most nonprofits aren't going to have that type of connection, aren't going to have that type of network. And that's where I feel like universities can be amazing partners. But you guys are very complicated. So, you know, there are very few bureaucracies that can rival government than a big university, right? And everybody's basically fighting over their own resources. And so you guys, a lot of you are nonprofits, right? And that makes it very difficult sometimes to just be like, who should I talk to? Well, oh, you should talk to like 10 people. Well, it's hard to do work with 10 people versus one. And so part of it is really being introspective about, okay, well, how to create that feeder? How do we create kind of that pipeline to do that work?
Where would you say, like, if an academic wanted to, you know, get started and work with you, who would they talk to? How would they reach out? Like, what do you see as those kind of entryways into these partnerships?
Yeah, for me personally, contact me directly. Because one thing that Goodwills do extremely well is we are a very close-knit community. You know, I know every single Goodwill CEO in the movement. We talk regularly. We have 2 annual events a year where we get together and ideate and forecast and things of that sort. So we are very collegial as a movement. While we may be autonomous organizations, we rob Peter to pay Paul all the time. We share and steal ideas from one another because it allows us to do our job much more efficiently. So if there's a particular problem that you're looking to solve that's either in sustainability, workforce development, warehousing, supply chain logistics, any of that stuff, whether it is from a hardware standpoint or from an algorithmic standpoint, you can definitely reach out to me, because I love this work. I think that computer vision, machine learning, especially in augmented reality, I think are the 2 things that can disrupt our movement the most based on business applications. And quite frankly, if you're looking for data sets, we have maybe 2 decades worth of national macro data that we don't even know what to do with, right? So, you know, we used to joke around that Goodwills are usually an economic indicator of when recessions come in the US, because when the economy is doing really well, we get a lot more donations. When the economy is not doing well, we get a lot more shoppers. And we've always known, like, Goodwills are typically recession proof. And so how do we use the data that we have and move from the anecdotal, but then also find, okay, what are these markers, right? Where can we use machine learning to help mine the data that we have, and then cross-check that with other national trends. So that's just like one of many ideas. where I see machine learning playing a part. But yeah, for this particular case, reach out to me directly. I'm on LinkedIn. I love this work. I love talking about this work, and I know I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. So opportunities like this to meet individuals like you is how we're going to get it done.
Anna, do you have a question?
I think you got mostly answered, but thank you. I really appreciate the talk, and I really appreciate especially like your thoughts on this pipeline between like how do you think about like a real problem, what are the research components to it, and that you have to like really focus on like doing one thing right, particularly when I'm thinking about for us as researchers and how we can contribute to applications that we all care about. That's something that I try to keep in mind. So it's very inspiring to hear that from you as well. And yeah, I'm curious, what are the goals in terms of like that you're thinking about for the in terms of like for the workforce, for like basically like in terms of like labor help for employing people. You mentioned this, I really liked your point about that who you're employing really like how can I say, you should be as diverse as you can with who you're employing, because the people who are going to be the best workers are going to do the best work are the people who need it the most. And those people are oftentimes biased, receive bias against from society in receiving employment, like people who come from prisons in particularly. So that was a really amazing point. And I'm thinking, I was wondering, like, what are the plans from here on to integrate people into the workforce? Yeah.
Yeah, no, great question. So I'm going to put my CEO hat on and give this group advice from a business standpoint, right? So turnover is extremely expensive. And on average, depending on what field you're in, it could be anywhere from $2,500 a person to $30,000 a person of either lost production, training, development, all that stuff, right? So when I talk about the inclusivity of these populations, there's a business aspect to it, right? Yeah, you want to do what's good, you want to do what's right, but the reality of it is there are twice the amount of jobs available now than there are people are to fill it, and that isn't going away anytime soon. So you have to turn over as many rocks as you can to find the talent. But in your field and in a lot of advanced technological fields, a lot of the work you're doing is really, I shouldn't be paying you, say, $100,000 a year to do data entry, right? Or data annotation. And so, but right now, the federal government isn't even capturing the jobs that people are doing in emerging technology space and realizing that, oh, hey, no, I can actually find a line level employee to build up in my startup to do this base level work. So the developers and so the engineers can really focus on more of that creativity aspect. And so for me, that's where I see a lot of the workforce development moving to is, you know, you can't cannibalize yourself within your industry over and over and over, because the cost, the value proposition is no longer there, because you're such a tight-knit community, right? You're stealing, and big corporations are just stealing from one another. So you really have to focus on homegrown talent. And what people at Goodwill can do and represent is that, hey, you have initiative, you have grit, you have understanding of some of the technologies, and we're going to get them to that point to where they're going to start off running at a line level to do some of this work, so they can naturally grow within your ecosystem. Like, that's what I'm hoping that we can create. But I think a big part of it too, and it's an extremely important part, is that the communities that I serve don't even know the opportunities that are in front of them. They've never seen a collaborative robot before. They've never tinkered with VR. They don't even know what AR is. They don't have any concept of what AI is, right? They don't even realize they're interacting with a form of it every day, right? Already in their general life. And so part of it is the awareness piece of it. So as you're doing this work, the reason why I focused on the hardware component initially was I needed to allow people to touch it, taste it, feel it, because then they can really understand it. And I'll share one anecdotal story that scared the hell out of me, because again, these are the people making decisions for us. But I went and spoke with the senators of Missouri and Kansas with my buddy John McGilligan, who's CEO of York Exponential Robotics and AI Company. And we went and he had that little collaborative robot I showed in the video that kind of follows you around like a puppy dog. Well, the business case for that was it was weapons recognition. So the proof of concept was you can have these go around schools and look for handguns, knives, things of that sort. But it was also programmed to follow you around. So we rolled this thing out into past security, into the Senate floor. Everybody's treating it like it was a puppy dog and taking pictures with it, selfies. And we're having lunch with state senators in both Kansas and Missouri. And I told John, I said, John, tell him what happened. He was like, hey, no one checked this in security. I rolled this thing out onto the Senate floor and I could have strapped a bomb to that thing and you would have been none the wiser. And when you saw that paradigm shift of, holy cow, that's not a toy, that's a threat, nevertheless an opportunity. Like these are the individuals these are policymakers, right? These are leaders in government. These are elected officials. These are, it's the interns that are writing tech policy in a lot of ways. And so part of it is the awareness piece. The awareness piece at this point is so crucial, especially when we're talking about unintentional biases. And the fact that a lot of individuals that are creating this are creating for the sake of creation and not thinking about the unintended consequences of it, right? Especially when it comes to justice, especially when it comes to displacement of workforce. And so part of it is the awareness of, hey, this technology exists, this is where it's going, these are the biases, these are the threats, as much as the opportunities. I think is a big part of what I want to do at Goodwill is create that narrative. Hey, you have to have this conversation about how are you bringing people along rather than just for pure creation, because it can be catastrophic if we don't do it right in regards to that. And I will say, I want to go back to another point, Lily, that I want to make sure that I preach to this group, and you're probably learning in your classes, but when we did our proof of concept, we completely underestimated how much we needed to narrow the scope. Every new classification we added complexity, that exponential complexity into the work. And so as you look at these problems, the more you narrow, the more you fluff off, the more you get to that minimum viable product or that proof of concept, it'll save you and your client a hell of a lot of money and resources, and can still probably give you the same information you're looking for. And then the hardware component, I think, was probably the most important part, more so than the algorithms that were already at market, which is, by the way, was just taken from different industries. It wasn't, it was already existing, but it was in boxing and kitting. But I want to make sure I reiterate that point to this group, is that when you look to form these partnerships, the narrowing of the scope and the data integrity, holy cow. Just the simple fact that we went through the process of, is that good data or bad data? Or is that necessary data or not? That in itself was worth its weight in gold, right? Because it made us rethink. Sorry for my dog, she's giving her opinion as well. And so part of it was making us look with a mirror. Okay, well, what are we tracking? Why are we tracking it? And what's really going to bear fruit? So when you do your value proposition with potential partners, that should be part of your business case. Is that not only are we going to come in and analyze your data, we're going to teach you what's good data, what's bad data, what's necessary data, and data that you're not even considering using. And I think that's probably your biggest barrier, is that when you look to partner with nonprofits, we are not very good at collecting data. Goodwills are really good, and I would say we're probably only about the 50th percentile in the real world. So I just want to make sure I slam on that point there.
Awesome. We're nearly at the end of our time, but maybe we can close on this last question, Ed, which I think really is at the heart of so much of Goodwill's mission, and also at the heart of MD4SG's mission. So you were talking about what policymakers and what these organizations and communities need to know about in terms of like learning more about AI and like this kind of computational challenges. But I always like to think of it as the AI community and the research community has so much to learn from your organizations like Goodwill. So in particular, when working with marginalized populations, so is there any advice that you'd give to researchers about who are intending to work with marginalized populations and how to go about that process thoughtfully?
Yeah, really reflect on a day in the life. Marginalized populations, a lot of individuals, especially individuals that we serve at Goodwill, they are worried about whether or not they're going to eat something. in the day, that day, whether or not they're going to have to pay for their electricity bill or consider being homeless, right? So when a lot of the marginalized populations, they're living day to day. And when you live day to day, that is pure survival mode. So understanding where people are and meeting them where they are in your research, rather than I think we all, and especially me as a privileged leader, I like to think I know what's best for people because I have to, it's my job, right? But the reality of it is you really have to meet the individual or the organization where they are and then work around that, right? And one thing that I will say, because of the work that you're doing is so new in a lot of ways, the bias aspect of it, really take time to, all right, what are the unintended consequences here that I'm not even seeing, right? There was a case that we learned about how certain court systems are basically giving people numbers based on their likelihood of making parole. I'm sorry, not making parole, making bail. And essentially they're basically being dished a number of, hey, you're high risk or low risk. And understanding the biases that could possibly come from that type of work using machine learning. So for me, what I would not want you to do with this work, as awesome and societal changing as it will be, is that do not fall in the trap of providing false hope, right? There's nothing more damaging and corroding than giving a population who has constantly been looked over, constantly been marginalized, constantly been taken advantage of, and saying, hey, I'm going to do this big, awesome thing, and then not deliver on it, right? So I will say, especially in your field, under promise, over deliver. Make it your mantra. Make it your mantra, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to disincentivize them from that growth mindset, from looking at this as a possible solution for them. Or if I'm a parent of a kid with a disability and I'm elderly and don't know what's going to happen when I die, like these are the real issues that they're living with on a day-to-day basis. So there's giving hope and using the technology to provide that hope, but being deliberate about making sure you deliver on whatever you say you're going to deliver on. Now that's kind of macro level, but philosophically, the work that you're doing, yes, there's creation part, and I love that part, but you have to be deliberate. I like, yeah, here's a great idea, but here are the biases. And if the ethical side of what your development is not as important as the creativity side, you're already doing it wrong, because it will hurt somebody. Somebody will find a way to take advantage of it for whatever they're serving. And they may not mean to hurt anybody, but it will hurt. And so as you do your work, really put in the same effort in that ethical debate about what you're creating and who you're partnering with, right? And why you want to partner in that space.
Amazing. That's such an important lesson. I really, really love that. Under promise, over deliver, think about biases. That's such a fantastic wisdom to end on. So with that, we are at time. So I want to thank everyone again for joining. And thank you so much, Ed, for coming to share these important stories and lessons to our community and the folks who will watch this in the future on the recording.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you, group. I appreciate the time. Hit me up on LinkedIn, stay connected. I want to learn from you too. So please find me. I'd love to learn what everybody's working on and follow your journey, because again, I'm not a technologist. I need you. so hit me up, and I'm a resource whenever this group needs it. So thank you very much for the time. Right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.